It's December 11th, 2014, and I was just describing a few things to lead up to what I was going to continue talking about with the Ballingers. But in order to do that, I wanted to touch on a few other unusual things that were happening around the time that I was being sexually assaulted and raped by a lot of government employees, and how some of what they did began to take a different kind of a turn a little bit, and how other things came into play that were then mentioned and incorporated into all of the attacks against me. So I was just describing the day that the Pentagon called my house, Moses Lake, Washington, to announce Katie Middleton being born. And so kind of hard to explain that whole layout of the house, but I'm sure that you can get an idea. And so basically, I knew something was going on because there was a very high tension and level of energy in the house. And I don't really know that I recognized it for maybe I think that I was going to say I don't know if I recognized something was going on maybe a few days prior to the phone call. But I think actually, now that I consider, I think that I knew something was brewing because I had overheard a lot of things in the year leading up to this telephone call that announced her birth. There was I had actually even overheard conversations, I think, regarding the planning of having her born. Of course, nobody would maybe know that it was going to be her. I don't know if anyone specifically planned for it to be a girl or not. But even from the moment that they found out it was a girl, it was talked about before she was ever born. There were a lot of really just strange things going on. And so there was kind of a build-up to that preceded this entire telephone conversation. And one thing I noticed is that one of the, either under someone's instructions or not, I'm not sure, but someone had a very serious, or some group had suddenly decided that it was imperative that I be trashed, basically, worse than ever before. And I think they were wanting to get rid of me, or to, I guess, to ruin my abilities and think of ways to ruin my future. And ahead of time, before she was even born. And I believe that the reason for that was because I was getting tortured by her parents. And her parents worked with people in the United States that also tortured me, and some people in England and Canada that tortured me, literally, when I was a girl. It wasn't like Katie Middleton was born and then suddenly I met the Middleton family and I was getting tortured. They were torturing me before she was ever conceived. So I think it became a fear of theirs that, I think as it is with many families, they might be fine torturing some little kid. And then the minute they have a kid of their own, they start getting nervous a little bit. They start thinking, okay, we've just been torturing this little girl for a few years. And she knows who we are and will probably remember some of this. And, you know, when you're planning to have your own kids and suddenly getting territorial about wanting to protect your own children, when you've been, you know, molesting and torturing, harming another little girl or kid, I think that the natural fear is of retaliation in the future. Someone's going to talk about it. Maybe someone will try to do the same thing to their kid because of what they did to someone else's kid. Maybe the kid that they tortured will rise up against them in the future at some time and begin testifying against them as a witness. And so you have all of these different things that present as serious problems, especially if when they have such high ideas as, you know, getting into the royal family and having their kid connected to them. So, so some of the things that were happening to me is, I had been trained in etiquette and a lot of various things that that I did that came naturally to me were to be very organized. I was very smart. I was also extremely organized. I was a perfectionist. Always wanted my room clean. Always wanted to be on time. Kept track of the time all the time. I was meticulous. I was not. I had creative, emotional streak running through me, of course. But there are a lot of artists out there who have another side to their personalities that is kind of like an accountant, or very business oriented, where they're very organized. They're not just some kind of artistic slob. They are highly into detail and also into the big picture. And that's how I was. And all of a sudden I was getting trashed. I was being told I was getting tortured if I cleaned my room. I was having my clocks moved around. It got worse after she was born, but some of the deconstruction of my personality and my habits and everything that was who I was began before she was ever born. So some of that was happening. Some of the torture intensified. I noticed some people getting really on edge and nervy around me. And they started getting concerned about how much I was remembering of things that they had all done to me. So there were a lot of telephone calls before Katie Middleton was even born. And there were people meeting each other, discussing things. And so there is this definite sense of something going on prior to this phone call, but then it intensified right before the call. And then the day before, all of a sudden it was like, I don't really remember anyone staying up overnight, but maybe someone did. But by the next day or morning, for a couple of hours, this Bob Jr. was sitting at the table just waiting for this phone call. Very tense and kind of expectant. Didn't seem to be a negative kind of energy from him at all. More like, you know, he was pacing. He was pacing like somebody would be waiting outside of a hospital neonatal center. So he was pacing back and forth like an expectant father, and then finally sitting down at the table and just kind of, you know, sitting down and nervous, like tense, waiting for this call or for something to happen. And then this Dixie that was there, whichever one it was, I don't remember her being around like pacing too much. But she was very quiet. She was doing sort of her quiet meditative kind of thing. And when she did that she sometimes retreated to their bedroom, and then I wouldn't see her for a while, and I had no idea what she was doing in there. Sometimes I wondered if she was praying. Other times I wondered if she was just thinking of psychic things to think about. I really don't know what always was going on. But she was not pacing back and forth. She was kind of around the corner in the other side of the room, other side of the kitchen, very, very quiet. And maybe coming out of the bedroom a few times and looking slightly nervous, but that was about it. So I knew they were waiting for a phone call, and I knew, okay, this is not because of anything that they said or indicated to me, but I knew there is something really serious going on, and I don't know what it is, but I think they are positioning themselves right by the telephone like this so that they can be right there to take the call. And I had the idea that I need to intercept this telephone call. I need to get to that phone before they do and pick it up and find out what this is about, because this is serious, whatever it is. So I was kind of hanging out in the kitchen at first, this Bob Jr. got kind of irritated. So go to your room and find something to do. I'll just hang out in the kitchen doing nothing. And I said, well, you're out here doing nothing. But anyway, I was told to go to my room. So I went to my room, and I believe I shut the door, made sure I made a noise so it sounded like it was shutting, and I tiptoed out very quietly. Went behind the chimney in the living room, which was this large brick structure that you could hide around and people couldn't see you, but it was like right over here, and then here's the phone over here. You cross over the hallway that led through the kitchen, and it was just a few quick steps right to that telephone from this little post. So I hid out there, and I was very quiet, hoping that since they'd heard the door slam and they were preoccupied, they think I was in my bedroom. And I just made sure I was ready to run to that phone. So the phone rang, and I sprinted to that phone, and picked it up. And the woman said, "Hello?" And actually, what I remember is I said nothing. I was afraid that if I said hello myself, I would give myself away as being the little girl in the house and not a parent. And so this woman, hearing silence on the other end, said, "Is this Dixie?" And then at that point, I knew I had to say something, so I just said yes. Figured yes is not going to give away too much of my voice and my age, and it would sound female, hopefully, and she would continue talking, which she did. So all of a sudden, I picked up this phone, and right away she said, "Is this Dixie?" I said yes, and this Bob Jr. was over at the was sitting at the table, and I think he'd already stood up, and he was coming towards the phone, because typically if I answered the phone, I would hand it over to my parents. But what happened was, I knew that this woman believed that I was one of my parents, and I wasn't going to give away the fact that I wasn't. So instead of my just turning the phone over to my parents, I was pretending to be my mom. And I will tell you what she said next.